Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Resolving and Avoiding Drug Shortages and the Health Crises They Create. My name is Barbara Peck. I'm the Manager of Community and Industry Recognition at ISPE. Now, before we jump into our topic, I do have a few quick housekeeping items to cover. Today's session will be about an hour-long session with about 40 minutes for presentation, and then we've left some time at the end for your questions. So please make sure if you have a question for our speakers, anytime throughout the session that you put them into the question box on your control panel on the right side of your screen. Now, we are recording this session, and we'll be sharing that recording as well as the PDF presentation with all of our registrants within 24 hours. And you'll have access to this for 30 days and then available to all members after the 30 days. Now, to get our session off the ground, I am going to hand over our reins to Melissa Figgins to introduce herself and our guest speaker. So Melissa, over to you.
Thanks, Barbara. It's an honor to be here today to discuss this important topic. I've worked in the pharma industry in product development, manufacturing, and quality for more than 25 years, and I know there are few other topics that connect us so closely to patients or inspire us to keep working or work harder than drug shortages. ISPE is a strong influence in our industry, and the focus that they have been providing for almost a decade now through the ISPE Drug Shortages Initiative has been making a difference. The current drug shortages team, of which I am a part, has one of the highest and most diverse participations from the ISPE member volunteers. You need not look far to see recent output. The July-August 2020 Pharma Engineering publication presents best practices for engaging with health authorities to mitigate and prevent shortages. ISPE has partnered with the Pew Charitable Trust with support from PricewaterhouseCoopers to conduct a research project to understand the impact of market forces and other dimensions impacting decisions and reactions to potential or actual shortages. ISPE published the Drug Shortage Assessment and Prevention Tool and the Drug Shortages Prevention Plan to provide actionable methods and plans that have enabled continuous improvement in the industry, helping big and small companies alike to reduce the frequency and duration of drug shortages. Now, as long as there are drug shortages, however, as an industry, we must stay engaged to protect patients with a hope that we can continue to reduce shortages and the health crises they create. By joining us today, you are helping us with that mission. So thank you and welcome. Now, to begin, I'd like to poll the audience so we understand your experience. So if we can just start that poll. So really just looking for, have you been personally affected? Do you know someone who has? Is it through your work, or are you just here to learn? So you can go ahead and take that poll. And just getting a big message that a lot of you who are joining, it's through the work that you do. For those of you who have been personally affected, you're going to be in good company today because somebody, the main speaker for us, also has been personally affected. And I see about 29% don't have experience, and you're just here to learn. And absolutely, thank you for joining and welcome. So really great response. And as I said, so today you're going to hear from someone who was personally affected, Laura Bray. Laura's daughter is bravely facing pediatric cancer, and during her treatment, they also have faced 3 drug shortages. After working tirelessly to resolve her daughter's first shortage, and with a lot of help along the way, including one who is also joining us today, Jody Gary from Mckesson, Laura founded Angels for Change, a nonprofit organization that is providing support for people who are affected by a shortage and don't know where to turn, and also to promote and develop proactive and systemic changes that are needed to bridge the gaps that are currently inherent to the supply and distribution system that connects our patients as manufacturers to our product as manufacturers to our patients. Now, we were gonna share a video, but we'll link that to you. We were a little worried that it might provide some lag. So Instead, I'm going to have Laura come out. She is an absolute inspiration. She's proof that one person can start and affect real change. Laura, if you'll start your video, then everybody can see, and she is looking really great today. You are a wife, a mother, a college professor, and now you are Angels for Change Chief Change Maker. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me here. Thank you to the ISPE. I'm so grateful that you're allowing us to share our story today. And I really think that was a wonderful introduction. As Melissa said, our daughter, our middle daughter, she had just turned 9, was diagnosed with leukemia. You know, our lives changed really quickly. It was the end of 2018, and it changed with just a couple of words. The words were, over a cell phone, there are blasts in Abby's blood. There's a bed waiting for her at St. Joe's Oncology Unit. Pack a bag, plan to stay, and get there immediately. And with that word, our lives, cancer disrupted our lives. Childhood cancer, unlike adult cancers, is a family diagnosis. Whatever you had before, you still have. It's there. It's just cancer underlies it all for all the members of the family. If you had work or extra school, extracurricular activities, house repairs, they're still happening. You just have more and new decisions to navigate. As the parent, as you know, if you're a parent, it's your job to support everyone through all changes. Little changes like, can I still see my friends? And big ones like, will people laugh at me when my hair falls out? It was during this time, right after diagnosis and for the first few months, that I began jokingly calling myself the caretaker in chief and chief normalcy officer. See, we could focus on normalcy in those first few months because of assurances that we were given at Abby's diagnosis. Leukemia, or acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL, unlike other pediatric cancers, is stressed at the beginning that we're lucky. It has a cure. There's this wonderful protocol, and that we will follow the protocol and the cocktail of drugs that are given in very certain time frames, and that it leads to a very successful treatment. The first few months was really just about us figuring out how to do that, how to follow through all the protocols. The doctors use very wonderful success numbers in this treatment to help provide assurances, to warn you that compliance of this protocol is the key. And you, in turn, as the parent, you share that knowledge with your child to answer their tough questions. Before cancer, I always said one of the hardest things about being a parent is being blindsided by your child's questions at the worst times. You know, you're washing dishes and your child saunters up to you and says, "Mommy, what's 9/11?" You're like, I wasn't planning on answering that tonight during dessert. Or you're driving down the interstate and they say, "Hey, Mom, what's that person doing with their finger?" We could all probably share our funniest and cringeworthy kid question stories together. It's one of the things that unites us as parents. But nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for that day at the end of November 2018, when my 9-year-old asked me if she was going to die. I didn't have a great answer, but the answer I gave was this: I don't really know, but this treatment works. It's going to be hard. It's going to be long. There's going to be really yucky medicine. It's going to make you feel really yucky, but we're going to do our part. We're going to follow exactly what the doctors say every step of the way. And in the end, it's going to be okay. You see, for this tough question, I rooted my daughter's assurances in the assurances that the physicians gave me. When they don't want to take the medicine because 25 pills in one 30-minute time frame is too much for anyone, let alone a 9-year-old, you tell them how important it is. Their nurses tell them how important it is. Their doctors tell them how important it is. When they can't take the pain of being poked one more time, when they don't want their port to be accessed, when walking in the hospital again is a trauma, when they lose their hair. It's all for this medicine, for this protocol, for this timing. And we talk about it all the time. But when there's a shortage and you have to pause or miss or remove one of those miracle drugs, their medicine, how do you answer your child's question? Mommy, am I going to die because I can't get my medicine? This was the question that I was asked in April of 2019 when Abby faced her first of now 3 drug shortages. I did not know drug shortages existed. I actually was blindsided by that knowledge. 29% of you in the poll mentioned that you're here to learn. You don't really have any knowledge of it. Well, that was me, and I didn't know where to start. But I gave my daughter the only answer that I could. I told her I would try. I'm going to try and get it for you. So that's what I did. I had no experience or any idea how, but I started and tried with the knowledge that I had or that I could find. That's where being a business professor helped me. I started with my knowledge of supply chains. I teach supply chains. I started with my knowledge of economics. I teach economics. I thought to myself, there's a shortage. The market resolves shortages. It's a supply and demand situation. Is this a QA situation? So I started there and I began figuring out what was happening with this specific drug, with this specific supply chain. I'm just an ordinary person, an ordinary mom. I live in Tampa, Florida. I teach at a community college. But I think I've come to believe that it's through just being willing to try, especially when you don't know what you're doing and you're outside of your comfort zone, that really extraordinary things can happen. I began making calls throughout the supply chain, calling 800 numbers, starting with 800 numbers and asking anybody if they would help me. I started with the manufacturer. I started with the FDA. I learned that the product that she was on shortage with actually had kind of 2 manufacturers. Well, they had a manufacturer, a lab that created the drug, and then a distributor who licensed the drug. And then they had a third party, which was the distributor who shipped the drug. And that third party was Mckesson. I was calling everyone throughout the supply chain, asking people to help me, imploring them. I was zero focused, and I had a sense of urgency. When I started calling Mckesson that first day with an 800 number, they were the only ones who were really answering my questions and talking about this like it is a real problem. Many of the calls gave me feedback like, this isn't a one-off, it'll pause, it'll get back. So when Mckesson began answering my questions or even offering to help, even from that initial first phone call, I had hope. And each member kept putting me forward to a new person. I finally made our way to the team who actually is in charge of the drug. And it was at that time where our search for this drug, Erwinaze, really changed. There was a promise to me that we do not have this product. It has been shipped, it is out in the marketplace. But if you can find it, we will deliver it to your daughter. And once I had that promise, the rest seemed easier. I have a partner. I'm not by myself trying to figure out how to help get my daughter back on the protocol. So we began calling hospital to hospital, friends, neighbors, my loved ones, calling one hospital at a time, trying to find the Erwinaze, and we did. And when we found it at a hospital where no one was on the protocol, Mckesson delivered on their promise and delivered it to my daughter. She was back on that database protocol. But after that, I really couldn't stop thinking about what had happened and about that shortage and that it was still ongoing. Abby might be back, but what about every other child? Every day I would wake up with a new question, like, how often does this happen? How long has this been going on? Why isn't the market reacting normally to adjust this? What has already been done to fix it? And every day I spent my extra time researching these answers. I found many answers, but each answer created more questions for me. And I found while this was new to me and I was uninformed about it, it wasn't new, and that many people had been working for years, decades to fix this. Eventually I came to a realization. This wasn't a one-off. It was a real problem, systemic. The marketplace wasn't functioning like the free market is supposed to during a shortage. But worse, because the customer is so far removed, because I'm so far removed, because my Abby was so far removed from the process, these can be completely hidden from it. One day I said to myself, Laura, you have spent 2 months researching and researching, and you are in analysis by paralysis. This is too big, too deep, and too complex for you to put your research hat on and work your way out of it like you do as a college professor. And to be honest with myself, I could spend the rest of my life, 90 years or more, 150 years, trying to become an expert on this, and still children would be waiting to be put back on their protocol. So I thought to myself, what do I know to be true? I'm not an expert, but what do I know is truth? And the only thing I could come up with is that I knew that no patient or parent should have to hear the words, we don't have the medicine to save your life. And no doctor should be in a place to say them. So I just started with that truth. I don't have to be an expert. I have to know this to be true and be willing to try to stop it and ask the experts if they will try with me. After that realization, a lot of things kind of fell into place. We, from an email, got a meeting with the FDA Drug Shortage Task Force. I founded Angels for Change, added a new title to my resume, mom, wife, professor, chief caretaker in chief, chief normalcy officer, and this time it was chief change maker. We launched a website, and a few weeks after that, the vincristine shortage happened. Once again, Abby was wrapped up into a life-saving drug shortage, and she was on hold from her protocol. But this time, I was founder of Angels for Change, and I had met many experts along the way who were willing to try to help me. And I could help more than just Abby. A few months after that, Abby was wrapped up in her third drug shortage. It was IVIG, 3 life-saving drug shortages and 9 months of treatment. And their shortages were all for very different reasons, resolved in very different ways, which led to looking at many more and different opportunities for problem solving and meeting many more change makers who are willing to try and be the experts to help me as I resolved shortages or help try to resolve shortages for families. All along the way, that original relationship with Mckesson that started with that original commitment, we will try. If you can get us where the medicine is, if we will distribute it to the patient. They kept good on that promise, not just for me, but for other patients. Well, not just for Abby or our family, but for other patients too. And our relationship was growing. They continued to help and support wherever they could. So today, I wanted to introduce you to one of those Mckesson change makers. I'm very proud and grateful to introduce Jody Gary, Director of Oncology Analytics and a pharmacist and team lead of the new Angels for Change Summit 1, to talk to us about Mckesson's role in Abby's initial search and how they support Angels for Change going forward. Hi, Jody.
Hey, Laura, thanks so much for that introduction. I also want to extend my thanks to the ISPE for allowing me to come and accompany Laura here today and talk with you. As Laura said, it's been a growing relationship and one that I'm honored to participate in. In terms of Erwinaze and what happened there, it really was a unique situation for several reasons. Erwinaze is a branded single source compound. It's complex to manufacture. In addition, there are no clinical alternatives, and it's used in curative intent therapy. So a patient becomes eligible for Erwinaze when they try and have an anaphylactic allergy to asparaginase. So the patient population is also pretty small for that particular product. Laura calls herself an ordinary person. We aren't actually accustomed to being contacted by patients or family members looking for drug products. So the fact that she, managed that that scenario and that communication and chain is fairly extraordinary as well. When the team heard from Laura, we had no process to address what she was asking support for. We didn't have compound in our distribution centers. We weren't expected to receive it for several weeks. We had no procedure to follow. So the team fell back on one of its core values, which is it's not just a package, it is a patient. And so the question we asked ourselves is, what can we do now? How do we move things around? How do we support this parent looking for drug for her daughter? So we couldn't locate the drug ourselves, but as Laura mentioned, we made a commitment as an organization and said, if you can find it at a hospital, at a clinic, and it's not earmarked for another patient, we will go and get that drug and we will deliver it to your child so she can continue her therapy. And that's what we did.
Wow, Jody, I can tell just how proud you are to work for a company that puts patient first, just like Mckesson does each and every single day. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the Mckesson approach to avoiding drug shortages?
Sure, happy to, Melissa. So again, Erwinaze was a fairly unique situation. Drug shortages tend to be more common in the generic space, and the generic team that we have at Mckesson uses several strategies in order to try and proactively think about and prevent drug shortages. The first of those is multi-sourcing. So certainly when we are able, as opposed to essentially putting all of our eggs in a single manufacturer basket, we try to multi-source and look for opportunities to partner with multiple manufacturers for a single product. One of the key elements of that strategy is using clinical pharmacists to help identify what are the most critical oncology agents that are, again, curative intent and don't have clinical alternatives. And so we're able to be very specific about the agents that are most critical to multi-source. The second is probably, I think, one of the most important pillars, and that is communication and collaboration. So without having that communication and collaboration with our manufacturing partners, they're on the phone with us weekly, sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times a day, trying to understand what their landscape looks like. Is there an impending API issue? Do they have a manufacturing issue that they're able to communicate with us so that we have the ability to be more proactive in looking at the supply we have and managing that supply? And then third and finally, the use of data and analytics. Real world data is so critical to using your history to evaluate your future. And so we have a couple of programs that we use to help manage existing supply. If and when we think there is an impending shortage or we have an actual shortage, we have a program called Fair Share that uses historical sales volume to evaluate what our customers are doing and how they're behaving with regards to a specific product. And so that really allows us to be flexible, be patient focused, and manage the supply, the existing supply we do have among those patients as they come into the clinic. And so we can spread out any existing supply we have to accommodate for patient needs. That Fair Share program also was used as a basis for how we've managed during the COVID-19 pandemic, which of course we're all still experiencing. And so knowing our reliance on China and India, countries that also are having issues, how do we proactively try and manage the existing supply we have?
Those approaches really resonate for me. The ISPE drug shortage prevention tool presents a structured approach that organizations can follow that are really similar. Maybe actually, Jody, can you tell us a little bit more about how Mckesson is continuing to develop new approaches based on, what you and your team are learning, either from examples like Laura's or from the recent COVID-19 pressures?
Sure. So again, Laura calls herself a normal, ordinary person, but she's done some extraordinary things. And so, I look at this simple graph here. When she first called, we didn't know what to do. The burden was largely on her in terms of locating the drug. But because of her role with Angels for Change, she's really become a beacon for other patients who have been put in the same position that she and Abby were put in. And so the Erwinaze team has put together a cross-functional group of people who can really reproduce the work that she did in the early days of Erwinaze. So again, being able to locate where did we distribute that product to? How do we reach out and communicate with those institutions or clinics to see if product is still on their shelf? Is it already earmarked for another individual? And then the process of product return and redistribution out to that child or that patient who's been waiting. And so, this is the process that we've put into place because, we've continued to maintain a relationship with Laura and Angels for Change. I'm sure, Laura, you'll mention this additionally, but, this is a reactive process. And so it's wonderful that we can put it in place. I think some of the things we've been talking about are trying to identify more proactive ways to help prevent the reactive struggle that we have to go through when we're faced with these critical scenarios.
That's very true, Jody. And I do want to make sure that, this process that Mckesson has developed, it gets better every time with us. When, it took 10 days for Abby's shortage reactively, when I engaged for it to be resolved. But because of Mckesson's cross-functional team within Mckesson that they've developed, and that they're getting better and better at it. So it now takes 2 to 3 days to resolve a shortage. And I want to talk about two small things about that. The first is this timing is so critical, not just for curative purposes, but also because the timing is about how the drugs work together and react together. These drugs can't be taken in together often. They have to be taken in the timing and with the agents that they need. We have a patient who we advocated for, and Mckesson helped resolve the shortage through this process. But just a 2-week difference, 2 weeks from when they were on hold, it took the parent a little while to find us. Hopefully that's something that we can make shorter. But and so just that 2-week difference, that patient is back on protocol, which is wonderful. But now, because of how the drugs work together, also is diabetic. He has chemo-induced diabetes. So along with all the other treatments that he is having to go through in the pokes and prods, his mom now has to give him 2 shots of insulin a day, as well as pricking his finger all day long. And if you know anything about pediatric diabetes, that alone is devastating to a family. And because of this change in timing, we just added on top, and it wasn't necessary. The other thing I wanted to say is that, I think I said it, we're learning every time. We're learning every time. And it is helping us realize that when we look at this supply chain, it's not just enough to have this relationship with Mckesson or a distributor of each individual drugs. That when we look at the supply chain, we've got to look at all the different players throughout the supply chain and recognize that there is a chain of custody of that product, and it's limited visibility by design. And that limited visibility solves a lot of things. It makes a very successful supply chain. How do we know this? We know it's a successful supply chain because last Friday, in the middle of a global pandemic, I could walk hand in hand into a hospital so that my daughter could get her life-saving treatment. But it doesn't mean that this visibility doesn't create barriers or walls or silos. So when we look at the supply chain as a perspective from an Angels for Change perspective, we see this linear process. What I did was usurp that linear process during the shortage. I went step by step to many different carriers and then tried to bring them together. One of the things that the new team that works at Mckesson jokes about is that there was a team of employees that took them 45 days to fix all the things that I broke. It's a fun little joke. But now, because there's a process and there is a trail and a process in place, it happens very seamlessly behind the scenes. What I want to say is we need to kind of look at the whole complete supply chain, even when you're not in purview, and these crosses, so that when there's a shortage, reactively, that's when I'm being engaged reactively. That was Abby's scenario, it was reactively. We have a way to communicate through. And we also need to look at the redistribution solutions. While it does by design go through the supply chain, what's the process for redistributing, which I was asking to happen in a reactive process? I believe that there is space for the nonprofit community to help with some of these connections, not just reactively and not just redistributively, not just through redistribution, but also systemically. So what we see is in managing drug shortages, we've got these amazing proactive processes that Jody talked about the Mckesson does. We also, have reactive, and I think it's probably fair based on the friends that I've met throughout this last 9 months, that within every member of the supply chain is working on proactive processes. They have done amazing proactive movement, especially in the last decade since 2011, when and these proactive processes have helped, but it hasn't eliminated. And then we've got these reactive processes that I am so proud to be part of. I am proud when a family calls and we're able to help them reactively through. And I also think about the vincristine crisis and how Pfizer jumped in reactively and really resolved that vincristine crisis very quickly. But it can't stop there. In any problem solving, there's reactive, proactive, and we know systemic. And when we have a system as complex and wide and deep as the healthcare system, we need to look at the systemic processes that make sure that when we do chain of custody and limited visibility by design, we're also leaving opportunities to resolve the shortages through communication and not creating barriers. Angels for Change in 2020 and beyond, that leads us into, we will continue individual advocacy. Anytime a parent calls, we will stop everything and help that family through that shortage. I would love more and more partners to help us resolve this, just like Mckesson, the original one, 10 days. Can we move it to 2 days? Can we go to 24 hours? I'm always looking for continuous improvement. For each time a family contacts me, I spend about 80 to 100 hours zero focused with a sense of urgency on that patient, getting them back on protocol. What in 2020 we want to start engaging is looking at the system-wide solutions. Can we spend 80 to 100 hours resolving more than just one patient shortage? Can we do 10, 100, 1,000? Can we remove that complete drug from the shortage? Can we remove that patient population from the shortage? What can we do? And in that understanding or mission, we have launched Summit 1, which is a virtual multidisciplinary healthcare summit that will look at pediatric oncology as a pilot for broader systemic solutions. And so that is on October 30th. We are very thankful that we already have sponsors from Mckesson Corporation, Jazz, and Hikma. And we are grateful for our speakers. The FDA will be speaking. Brian Tyler, CEO of Mckesson, will be speaking. Aaron Fox from the Drug Services Center. And also our keynote speaker is an oncologist at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Nurum Ungaru. This seminar is how we begin asking, how can we make systemic change, and really inviting wonderful players throughout the supply chain to be change makers with us. Are you willing to try? Because even in a complete puzzle, even when you have a puzzle working and fitting together like the healthcare supply chain, there are gaps in the pass-offs. It needs multidisciplinary problem solving and communication to fill those gaps. And I would love to be part of the nonprofit solutions that help fix it. Will you try? Will you be a change maker with us? I hope so. We're ready to try outside of our purview. Come along with us.
That's great. Thank you so much, Laura and Jody, for sharing your stories today. We've received several questions already, and I want to encourage people who are on the line to submit your questions. I'm going to get us started off with a few that have already been submitted. And actually, I think this is a really powerful one for you, Laura. It's what do you find to be the most challenging part of serving as a patient advocate?
Whew. Okay, so we've been talking now for almost an hour. We're friends, and I'm talking very, strategically, but about this time frame and what we do. But the reality is, Abby's diagnosis was threw us for a loop. But we had assurance in the protocol. Her shortage was probably the most helpless I have felt as a parent in my entire life. And I think the biggest challenge is the fact that every time a family calls, I go through it with them, the same sense of urgency, the same zero focus, the same roller coaster. We cry together. It's a very, very emotional and hard time. But I also think that that challenge makes me more suited for the role of advocate, and I can really understand in a way that that Mckesson can't. Mckesson's doing their part that they can, and I can help the patient through that. So that's the most challenging part. It's a very tough it's a tough 80 hours, 80 to 100 hours emotionally, but it is what drives our purpose.
Yeah, yeah. There's a question here for you, Jody. It's most organizations include the patient in their value framework. Mckesson seems to raise the bar. What is the most important ingredient that leads to that?
That's a great question, Melissa. I think a little bit twofold. I think that, being able to incorporate some clinical aspect up front in trying to manage through drug shortages is really important. It provides a little bit of background and again, access to patients and what's going on from the patient perspective. But I look and think about the team that Laura reached out to. Steve Bidwell was willing to say to his people, try something outside the box. We may not have the answers here, but we have to make an effort, and we have to try and do something to support this family. And I think that the answer is in the people.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, that makes sense.
And I did feel it, Melissa, Jody. I felt it, and there was a difference in even the values and the way that the employees communicated, even when they didn't have the knowledge, even then they didn't know what to do. There was an empathy that they understood that this was a serious issue, and there was a caring for this situation we found ourselves in. And I think that's quite unique, and it doesn't happen by accident. Doesn't happen by accident. It takes a lot of time and effort and resources from the bottom to the top for an organization to react in the way that I was asking, imploring an organization to act. So I think it's worth it to recognize that doesn't happen by accident. And I'm very grateful for all of the times that I've interrupted someone's busy day with something like this, and they prioritize it. It's quite unique.
Absolutely. I mean, it's such a great story, and it's obviously just started. So, just really great to have you here today. There's a question here, and actually it pertains to another organization that I've certainly heard of before, Civica RX. And one of the participants today wanted to know, Laura, if you're working with Civica RX. I know that you might like to, but maybe you can talk about like how you go about engaging with partners and pursuing those relationships.
So first, the answer to anyone who's asking if they can help, the answer is yes. I need all the help I can get. I am not an expert. Regarding Civica, this is the best question I've ever had. Jody will know this. The first time she met me, I was like, okay, there's this article I read in Forbes, and then I read this other article, right, Jody? Yes. And I'm like, there's this company, and I need to figure out how we can say thank you, but also then say, how can we help what you're doing, and how can we partner? So the answer is our website is angelsforchange.org. My email is laurabray@angelsforchange.org. I would love to know how I can help the important work that you're doing at Civica. And I am so thankful that there are executives like your executive team on, I don't want to be too much of a stalker, but I am, very, very thankful for the work that you're doing. And I would love to figure out how we can help you. Or how I can.
It does seem like it's a match made in heaven. So
Yes.
I have no doubt that.
And when I say I think there's opportunity for the nonprofit world to help fill in those gaps, of course, what I was thinking is Civica is, one of the first, but it's new, right? It's only 2 years old. And so the reality is, and we're new, we're less than 1 year old. I think this is the missing piece to the systemic, my hypothesis is a healthy nonprofit wing to this supply chain is one of the missing pieces to fill in what's left of the gaps. And I would love to know how we can help. And I'd love for you to come to our summit on the 30th of October and get your thoughts and ideas at Civica.
Okay. We have a really good one. I know this is it also something you're passionate about, which is definitely something that there is no shortage of on this call, I can tell. But it has to do with managing shortages that are ex-US. So maybe in countries that are have less of an infrastructure, and how can we resolve those shortages, or how do we extend the approaches being used, in this space, this U.S. space, to other regions, especially those that may not have the advantages. And actually, Jody, I'd be thrilled to also hear your perspective on that. How does Mckesson see? Do you look to different spaces in your distribution plans? I don't know who might want to take that first. Maybe Jody first.
Sure. So each country is going to have its own requirements for approval. And so I think the, again, important thing is falling back to communication and being able to communicate with the key players in the supply chain in order to best handle the situation that is specific to each country.
And I do want to say that there have been recent times in the last couple of months that Mckesson has reached across borders to help resolve shortages for patients there, and tried to figure out where their part could be in helping individual patients. I'm proud to have been part of some of those communications and discussions of how we can help patients. Now, from the broader perspective outside the supply chain, there are our purpose of Angels for Change is to ensure access to life-saving drugs. Ensure access does not stop at pediatric oncology. It doesn't stop at the United States. But how do you solve a problem? There's the old adage, it's one bite at a time, right? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And so our initial start, what I thought is, especially since my focus at this point, or not focus, or my experience at this time is in the pediatric oncology world, is to take one of the reasons why pediatric oncology has been more vulnerable to drug shortages and flip it on its head. So the small patient population of pediatric oncology is one of the reasons why we're vulnerable to shortages, why Abby had 3 in 9 months, but also the age of the protocol leads to a lot of generics. And so my thought was, how do you, maybe some of the reasons why there's some of these gaps still is because what's left is so big and so specific. So that's why Summit 1 is focusing on pediatric oncology as a pilot for broader solutions. Let's look at that first bite. Let's look at problem solving from real business, cross-functional solutions see what works, what doesn't work. Let's brainstorm. When we have a smaller patient population, less drugs. But Angels for Change does not want to stop there. Our purpose, this is my 10,000 hours. I made that decision a year ago when I had that realization that this is real and I can't sleep because of it. So ensuring access is something we want to be part of the solution, and I just need experts to help me figure out how.
Yeah. Well, I know, Jody, you said Laura has just sort of blown your mind as far as like what one person can do. So if anyone can continue to expand influence, it's you, Laura Bray. I have another question here. It's a little bit sort of like more, it's like a broad question. So maybe you want to, take it and give some example, but it's specifically, they're asking, what are the root causes and way forward to address the challenges, both short and long term, to prevent supply shortages? So it's sort of like, and there was another person that asked about proactive change that you see required. So that's a tough one. I mean, you can almost do a webinar on that question. So that said, but maybe speak a little bit more about, just your diagnosis and not Abby's, but the systemic diagnosis and what you see, and I'd love to get also both perspectives on this.
So first I want to say I still at this point just have hypothesis, right? I just have a lot of hypotheses based on what I've seen and experienced, and most of it I'm sure is sophomoric compared to the expert opinions that are on this call. So I'm just going to say some broad pictures. I think there is a need for communication through the supply chain and redistribution communication on the way through and the way out. There is a need for someone to be there when the patients run into these. Or let's talk about the customer. I think we could have a whole webinar just about who the customer is in the supply chain. Is it the person who's paying for it? Well, who's the person that's paying for it? Is the hospital paying for it? Is it the insurance company? Is it the payer? Is it the user? Is it the prescriber? And in Abby's, is it the person who gives authority? I say Abby's getting it, but she's the one actually getting it. And when we look at just this one piece of this market, the customer, and how many people are involved in it, it's no wonder that the end user can easily be missed in the problem solving. And then when you have the limited visibility by design, what you end up with is a lot of transactional or product-based problem solving, and maybe not empathy or customer-based problem solving. And what I was asking throughout the supply chain is empathy, customer-based supply, problem solving. And that's not by design what's actually happening right now. It's based on the purview of the product, which is important. I don't want to remove those wonderful things that make our supply chain work even through a global pandemic, right? What I'm saying is we need to figure out and brainstorm how we can add those in. And maybe it's through the nonprofit world, right? I mean, some of the reasons is because it's a very competitive and complex marketplace. I like business. I do like, so if I'm getting too businessy, but this is where a nonprofit maybe could help in communication through and back, or maybe.
Jody, what's your side on this? What do you see? I mean, I absolutely see that point. But in the existing supply chain, what do you think? I mean, if you had to pick, like the number one thing, like as far as diagnosis and solution, where would you land on that?
I think that there are so many different facets, and it's funny. One of the first times I met Laura, she wants to break down the problem and find solutions for individual pieces. And I think, why are we still dealing with this after so many years? Drug shortages are not new. They've been going on for decades. And why are we still struggling with? And it's complexity of how each group within the supply chain interacts across each other. The other thing I think that, is very interesting with the way Laura has put together the Angels for Change perspective on the supply chain is that it's linear. So the patient doesn't necessarily go back and influence each of the different other levers. And so each group functions within its own silo, and certainly communication supports crossing those silos, but maybe only from point A to point B. You don't have point A talking with point D. And so I think that complexity means that you might lose the perspective of the end user, who, let's say, the end person is the patient. So you lose their perspective a little bit.
Yeah, that's super insightful, Jody. I love that one.
We're actually one more about that. So one more thought is, of course, single source providing is a major issue. As long as there's only one source, there will be shortages. There will be, because there will be a quality assurance issue. There will be an unexpected issue. There will be a human issue that happens. So just, you know, and two of Abby's shortages were based on two different single source providing issues. And then of course API, you know, that's very difficult, but I like to throw the change, the technological change that's coming with blockchain. Hopefully that can help resolve some of it. Well.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I'm gonna manage you guys to first of all, I'm gonna do one last question, and I'm gonna hold you guys to like about a one-word answer, because I think this is a really great question. But if we're not careful, we'll go too far over, and then I'll draw us to a close. But this question is: you both operate outside of your box, extending your influence far beyond. I want to do the same. What is going to be the biggest challenge that I will need to overcome?
You want my answer?
You go first, Laura.
Fear, and then I know that was my one question, my one answer, but being willing to be vulnerable and saying, I don't know this, but I'm going to try anyways. But yeah, that's really fear, too, right? That's fear.
Yeah, it is. How about you, Jody? What do you think?
Resilience. You're going to be met with a lot of closed doors, and it's that resilience to keep trying and keep looking for out of the box opportunities.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. That's a good one, Jody.
Yeah. Yeah. That is absolutely. I can see how you are both so resilient. As we wrap up this this session, I just want to make sure that I thank you. This is I don't know of many other topics that are more important. So, you've inspired, I'm sure, many people. Maybe we've made a connection with you and Civic RX. That's also possible. I think it might be. ISPE is staying engaged on this topic. So by keeping this topic in, the forefront of everybody's minds, that's, been a really, that's been something that we've been committed to doing. We will actually be, sorry, I think my friend is driving back to just a notice about the ISP annual meeting. We will actually have a session on the 5th of November that is focused on drug shortages, and we'll have people from industry talking about communication with health authorities, business continuity planning. We'll be discussing COVID-19 and how that's actually helped to expose some things that we can work on that we might not have realized before. And you'll also get a chance to interact with FDA and industry experts together. Similar to this, you'll be able to ask questions and things like that. But Laura, I'm going to give you the last word, because you have been the star of the show, and in a lot of ways, your daughter, was the inspiration. But what do you have to say to the audience?
I want to say thank you for having me here today and letting me share our story. And thank you for all the work that you have done before I even knew this problem existed. I want to be here with you, finishing the work that you've started as part of the solution. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Jody. And Barbara, I'm going to turn things over to you. And thanks for everybody who joined today. We had a great audience, and I look forward to actually watching it all over again since I was paying attention to doing some other stuff. So thanks. And thanks, Barbara.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody. On behalf of ISPE, we do want to extend our thanks to Melissa, Laura, and Jody for speaking today. It was a very powerful story, and I think everyone kind of felt that same passion that you did, especially, this is so close to you. And I did have a question, and, feel free to be short with this answer, but I think everybody's going to want to know, is your daughter doing okay and she's doing well with her protocol?
Oh, guys, you're so sweet for asking. Yes, Abby is doing wonderful. She is doing the best case scenario. And, with any cancer, it's one day at a time. But we are very thankful for how well she's reacted to all of these wonderful medicines that are saving her life. So thank you for asking.
That is wonderful to hear. And I have great news that the person who asked about the Civica has offered to make a connection with you guys. So I'll send you his information. So very exciting. Well, with that, I'm going to wrap up and just remind everyone that we will be sending the recording and the presentation PDF so that you can go back and listen, and feel free to share the link. If you're a member, you'll be able to have access to it within about 30 days. We might open this one up a little bit early too, since it's such a powerful message. But just a reminder, if you are interested in our webinar series and you're interested in other sessions, to check out our calendar. You can find that on our website. And as Melissa mentioned, we have gone virtual for our annual conference this year, so you should check out our schedule. I think registration is opening up soon for that, so make sure that you have it on your calendar so that you don't have lots of meetings. Now, just as a reminder too, the ISPE always strives to be here for your professional needs. So we have a lot of information on the member part of our website, past webinars that we've done, blog posts, PE articles. So you should check that out. If you're not a member, it's a great time to join, so you have access to all this great information. So again, thank you. Please make sure to send us your feedback in the follow-up survey that will come at the end of the session. And we hope that everyone is staying healthy and safe, and that we will see you next time. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.